Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Angie Slattery-Hundley. How are you, Angie?
Good. How are you doing, Cesar?
I am doing good. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to give them a little bit of your background, but I actually want you to kind of introduce yourself. Before that, though, you are a mother of 2 boys and 2 girls, and you live in Kansas City, and you co-own Oak Creek Nursery and Landscape in Basehor, Kansas.
That's correct. Yep.
Awesome.
You got it.
So why don't you give us more about who you are? How was your upbringing? Tell us about you.
Well, as you said, I live in Kansas, just outside of Kansas City, Kansas, mother of 4. And I kind of grew up in Kansas my whole life. Started out in Southeast Kansas, and that I went to foster care there and shuffled around between the cities surrounding that area. And then got adopted by a family that lived in Chinook, Kansas. And then I came to visit my sister who lived in Leavenworth at the time, because my sisters and we got adopted in separate homes. And while I was visiting her over the summer, the summer before my freshman year, my sister and I plotted that I would come stay with her and live, throughout the rest of my high school career. And somehow we convinced our families to happen. So that's how I kind of up in the area.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So let me ask you this. Let's go back a little bit. And if you might share with the listeners, at which point did you get into the foster system, or how did that all played out? Because obviously you coming out of your childhood trauma was huge, and we want to tap into that, but I want to get some of the things before that.
Sure, absolutely. So I talk about it in my book, my memoir that I just released. But my sisters and I, we lived with my mom and her boyfriend. My parents had just gotten divorced. And my mom had this live-in boyfriend that lived with us, and he would care for us at night while she worked at a local nursing home. And so my sisters and I, we were under his care, and while we were under his care, he sexually abused us and physically abused us. And my sister was having some medical issues and needed addressed. So her school teacher called my mom when she was in kindergarten and asked her, some questions. And I'm not sure of the dialogue of how that went down, but there were some red flags that kind of came up through that conversation. And so I get pulled out of class, and they're basically telling me like, hey, we know there's something going on at your house. And I'm thinking, they've already talked to my sister. So I just lay it all out. And then we were in the counselor's office that afternoon, and that evening, my little sister and my mom came to the elementary school, and we were carted off and off to our first foster home. And we were the first foster home together for a short time. And then my little sister, I think she was 3 at the time. When we moved on to our second foster home, she went on to a different family. And then my other sister and I, we were together through the next few foster homes. And then, after the 4th foster home, I adopted. My sister, all of us got adopted in separate homes. Basically, what it came down to was that the judge kind of gave my mom an ultimatum, like, hey, get rid of your boyfriend if you want your children back. And somewhere along the way, I think, she was struggling with making that choice. So I think after going through some psych evals myself, I was having some issues with being suicidal. And I mean, obviously I'm 7, 8 years old and my whole world has just been scrambled. And so, I think it was kind of a recommendation like, hey, since you can't make this decision, we're going to make it for you. And so we ended up getting adopted in separate homes. And that's kind of where we, ended up from there. We stayed in contact through our families over the years. Our parents were gracious enough to kind of keep us together. We would write letters at the time because there wasn't cell phones.
Yeah.
And so we would see each other, a couple times throughout the year. And so, yeah, that's kind of a little bit of my background with that.
Yeah, definitely. How old were you when you were, I guess, when this whole thing came down and realizing that there was something going on and you were taken off of your mom's custody?
I was 7 when we went into foster homes. I have a sister that's a year younger than me. And then, like I said, my little sister was, I think 3 at the time. And we were in foster homes about 18 months before I got adopted. My sister just underneath me, she was in a few foster homes after that before she got adopted. And then my little sister that went on to her second foster home, they ended up adopting her. So that's about the timeline.
Yeah. And I can only imagine, going through that trauma. And I'm sure that, anyone that might be listening to this, that might be even going through something or might have gone through something. And I know that on your book, on your memoir, I'm sure you're talking about, the title of your book is The Recipe for Bad Lemons, Ingredients for Success from Life's Sour Moments. And so I'm sure you're talking about not only the experience, also the things you had to kind of do and go through to overcome, that trauma, right? And
absolutely,
definitely want to talk a little bit about that, because again, if there's someone here listening and watching this that again might have gone through something like this and haven't opened up and they're still dealing with that pain, or perhaps are going through this, right? This is pretty much everybody listens to this. What were some of the things that you at 7, like, first and foremost, what was going through your mind, right? Going from one foster to another, finally at the 4th one, you got adopted. What kind of pain or what's going through your head at that time that you had to overcome over the years?
Well, initially when everything was going on, obviously, I knew it was wrong because I was young. So the situation at home was terrible. I was scared. I didn't want to say anything. Obviously, once we went into the foster homes, I think part of me, I was hopeful that my mom, now she knew what was going on. So she was going to make it right. She was going to get rid of this guy. And, and even though I didn't know what the outcome of that was going to be, I think I was hopeful that it was going to be a change for us. So I was a little bit shocked when I found out that my mom didn't believe what was going on. And that was very hurtful, of course. But at the same time, I'm the oldest of my 2 sisters. And so I stepped into that motherly role for them. And when we were going through the foster homes, I was the one caring for them, worrying about them, making sure they were okay. They're crying and they're scared. And I had to put on that brave face for them because they needed that. And I think maybe it helped redirect me a little bit by caring for them. And of course, it's not ideal, going through any situation like that. And I look at my own 7-year-old right now, and the innocence that he has, it just, right. I forget what it's like, at that age until I see it in my own house. And then I'm like, my God, that's crazy. I can't imagine, first of all, I can't imagine any mother doing that, but I can't imagine any child going through that. And so obviously there's a lot of mixed emotions, but I think, while I'm going through that whole timeline, it was really, the focus was on my siblings, my sisters, making sure they were okay. Once we all got separated into separate homes, of course, I started really struggling because I think I just worried nonstop about where they were at, what they were doing. And then I think it hit me that, my God, this is what's going to be. I'm never going to see my family again. And then I went through a little bit of a depressive state. I was angry at my mother, of course, because she didn't seem to care about the situation. I remember we had supervised visits with her, and I was the oldest. We're sitting in the room with her, and I talk about this in my memoir, but I tell her, I'm like, it's, this is your boyfriend that's doing this to us, because she kept trying to convince us and the social workers that we were confused, that it was really our father doing this stuff to us. And I'm like, no, it's not our father, it's your boyfriend. And at one point she looked at me and said, well, there's nothing I can do about it now. And I was so angry at her. And I remember I was just done. I shut down from that point, because at that point, I think it hit me she's not going to change this. This is not going to get fixed. We're not going to be back together again. And so then I got really angry with her, really upset. And I kind of went through a depressive state. And as I said in my book, and I even fully disclosed a psych eval that I had done that I found in my adoption book. And I was suicidal. I didn't care. I didn't have anything to live for. I had no reason. Nobody cared about me. I had no value at all. And I don't know what it was. I think right before the adoption, I got asked by the social worker if I was okay with being adopted. And by that point, after being shuffled around and living out of a trash bag for 18 months, I was done with that. So here I had a family that was ready to take me in and adopt me and give me a home. And of course, yes, who would not say okay to that?
Right.
And so, I'm grateful that I get adopted. The situation, which, awful as it was, but I was just ready to be done with that scenario for sure.
Yeah, definitely. At what age did you first became suicidal?
I was around 8.
8.
8 years old, yeah.
Got you. So
and it's so funny. Like, I think about it now, like, I don't even know how in my mind I thought,
yeah,
I think I'm gonna kill myself.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
how
right.
did I how does it become a thought? I didn't watch a lot of TV. That's just how I looked at myself. I had no self-worth whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so it was about 8 years old when I was just like, my mom doesn't want me. I don't have family anymore. Nobody wants me. What's the point of even living,
Yeah.
And I was very down on myself and depressed about that. And then I think, at some point around that timeline, shortly after I got to that point, and I don't know how I got to this point where I'm like, maybe my mom didn't want us because she's trying to give us a better life. And somewhere around that time, I really started to believe that. And I think that became my newfound faith. That was like my redefining moment of, I do have a value. I do have purpose. My mom loved me so much that she gave us to another family that could give us more than she could give us. And how can I be angry at her for doing that? What a wonderful mother to do that to me, to do that for me. And I have to go do some great things because this is what she would have wanted. That was nowhere near the case, but in my mind, I believed that, and that became my faith to push me through the next part of it.
Yeah. And you know what? That's really amazing. And again, definitely going through something like that is not easy whatsoever. I'm sure it's not. And one thing that I capture in the people that are listening to us and watching this is that, there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of trauma, there was a lot of pain, right? And even thinking at the age of 8 that you have these ideas of already committing suicide. I mean, I couldn't even imagine that, let alone, you going through that. Yet what you said, I think, was very important in anything that we do in our lives. And you kind of change the perception and the framing of that situation you were going through. And when you started seeing things from a different perspective and changing that framing is where you found that faith or that purpose of continue to go through this journey, right? Which we call life. And so, having that said, how were the next couple of years for you? Even now, I hear a lot. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of that going on. So I don't know how that was for you, knowing that people or your friends or classmates knew that you were a foster kid. You have gone through so many foster homes. Was there any kind of bullying that added more to your madness?
And that probably was part of my depressive state that I was going through, is because of course I was the weird kid.
Yeah.
I was a foster kid, and I was embarrassed. I was ashamed, and I found myself making up stories about the situation. And looking back now, I had no control over my mom's choices. It's not like me at a 7, 8, 9-year-old can say, Mom, choose us, choose your children, get rid of this guy. There was nothing I could do to fix that. But it took me probably 30 years, 25 years at least, to recognize that it wasn't my fault. I had no control. I couldn't fix that at all. But I do remember being made fun of, being just confined, like lonely, like nobody gets me, nobody understands what I'm going through. Like I said, I never really talked about my situation with my friends. My closest girlfriends are just finding out about the details of what I went through my memoir.
Yeah.
And I've been friends with one of them for 25 years. And she always knew I was adopted, never really knew my situation or what the scenario was, but to read about it in full detail. And my first chapter, it's very raw. Like I share details in my memoir of what I was experiencing, because I want people to understand just maybe an ounce or maybe little bit of what it was like for me living in that environment to be able to push out of it. But I think when I found my inner strength, the power of the mind is so great. Instead of focusing on all these terrible things about my father being gone, my mother abandoning us, my sisters being gone, I shifted my mind to focusing on the fact that I needed to go and do great things. I needed to go be happy and have friends and be a kid because that's what my mom wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. At which point, I mean, I know that a lot of times we as kids, it doesn't matter whether you're going through what you went through or any other stuff, maybe the separation of your parents, you guys get divorced or they get divorced or something to you, maybe even not as significant as what you went through. Sometimes we as kids tend to blame ourselves. It's our fault. We're going through this. The family's going through this because of me. At which point did you realize that, what, this is not my fault. There's nothing I can do to control the situation, right? Or were you carrying that blame for quite some time in your journey?
I think I carried it for a very long time. Like I said, I didn't really come to the realization that, it didn't really hit me until probably about 20. I was 25 years later, probably I was probably my 30s when I recognized it as my mother myself, that I look at it and I'm like, wow, I really had no control over any of that. Why am I so guarded and secretive about this childhood of mine that I had no control over? And I think that's probably when I started opening up a little bit more about it. I still was kind of closed-minded about the whole incident itself, my whole childhood. But I think that's probably when I really started looking at it much differently. I talk about it in my memoir, but my redefining moment of coming out with my story really came from when I met with a social worker probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I thought I wanted to give back into the foster care system somehow. And I know for me, like the best scenario is not for me to be a foster parent. My heart is so big that I would have such a hard time with separating myself. I would get so attached. I would want to fix somebody and bring them, to success and bring them to my life that would not be conducive. They would probably have to go back to their family or whatever it may be. And that would be really difficult for me. I think mentally it'd be a huge challenge, but I do want to give back and to give something back to an organization that gave me a roof, gave me a home, gave me a family. But when I met with this social worker, she was sharing with me how the success rate for foster children is less than 5%. And I never had heard that, never even thought about it. And I think, over the course of my life, I was just going through life doing what I thought everybody else was doing. You go to school, you graduate, you go to college, you graduate, you go build success, you build career. And I never sat back and thought about how I was a minority with the statistics with regards to my childhood. And I think it just floored me. And that meeting was probably the kickstart of where my brain started thinking about things much differently. Like, I've got to do something. I've got to say something. I've got to help. If I can share my story with other people out there that have maybe been through something traumatic, something similar to this, and there is a way you can cycle out. And I found that way, then I need to share that with other people because it's got to inspire somebody. And what I found in situations like mine, when it comes to trauma, a lot of people don't talk about it. And I know I didn't talk about it. I didn't want anybody to know about it. I didn't want to disclose it. I didn't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I just wanted to feel normal. I wanted to feel like, hey, I came from the best family, just like you came from the best family. And I had the same upbringing that you had. I didn't want anyone to look at that and maybe define me in a sense or categorize me. And I've learned that as I've even shared my own personal journey, I've had people come to me that have said, hey, I was sexually abused by my uncle or something, and never talked about it. And it's sad that we live in this world where we feel like we can't, that we have to hide from stuff like that we have to feel ashamed by something that somebody else did, because it's not our fault that we were abused or we were attacked or we were victims of something, Yeah. And so I think that that's probably one of the things that I've wanted to do is try to inspire others to let's help this 95% that's struggling, that can't cycle out the resentment, the anger, that's holding on to all this and don't know how to get over here to this 5%. And maybe if we share more of these 5% stories, maybe that 5% will turn into 6 or 7 or 10 or whatever it may be. But let's help these over here that are just like us, that just somewhere got lost. Yeah. And that's what I'm hopeful for.
And that's amazing. And I got to tell you that unless you actually with your story, right, and you get out and you start talking about it, you start empowering other people. If you're not healing that pain, that trauma, typically what happens is that hurt people, and so you got to make sure that you heal that, so that you don't fall into that victim world of now hurting somebody else because of what you went through, because you see it as that being normal, right, or being okay with the society. And the only way to fix that is by doing the things that you're doing, right? And so that's amazing. And I am sure that throughout your years, you've gone through so many different things to really help you get to this point in your life, right? I want to know about the things that perhaps worked for you the best. What were some of the things that you had to do? You talked about the power of the mind, which is, I believe on that. That's so great on just changing that vibration in your head can definitely change things in your life, right? Besides that, what were some of the things that you had to do personally to get you through the toughest times, to get you through this, to get you to where you are now, and be able to do the things that you're doing now?
Well, in my memoir, I talk about other bad lemon scenarios. You know, I've been through a divorce. I've been through, I almost lost my son, had to stay 6 weeks in the hospital. I've been through a fatal car wreck. So I capture all of these different bad lemon scenarios and how I personally overcome each one. And these bad lemon scenarios that I capture are typical day-to-day stuff that a lot of us have dealt with at some point. And I really think that it just comes down to perception and how you view things. You know, you can sit and think about who's wronged you or how something has affected you or hurt you, but at the end of the day, you're not fixing it. And if you aren't fixing it, then you're just spinning in it. And so I think the biggest thing is acknowledging what it is that's got you to that place, and then figuring out a path or a goal to cycle it out. And it really is, again, like we said, it's about the power of the mind. You know, you can sit and wonder why you don't have something or why somebody did something to you, or you can go and be a better person and not feel like you've been wrong, you know? And I think oftentimes so many people feel like they're the victim in a situation rather than looking at the fact that, you know what, unfortunately this did happen, but you know, it's going to make me a stronger person and I'm going to go and do bigger and better things, you know? And I tell my kids that too, that it's not about, the focus should never be on what someone didn't give you, but what you have, and be grateful for what's been given to you and not what you didn't get. And so often I think people forget about that. And even in our own mindsets, when we're going through situations, you know, stop the focus on what happened and how you got to that. Focus on how am I going to move forward from it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that a lot of times we got to go through pain. And from pain, a purpose is born, right? And
absolutely.
And it's one of those things where you're like, well, I don't want to go through this, and I don't want to go through all that pain. Yet sometimes, again, that path is going to lead to a purpose to help other people, to empower other people, to become a better person yourself, right? One thing that maybe you can help us out with is that, you know, how do you switch your focus? How do you work on that mind? We have on an average 60,000 thoughts per day. Out of those 60,000 thoughts, 80% of them are negative, 95% are repetitive thoughts. And so when you think about those statistics, it's hard to focus and be resilient and be positive. So how do you go about doing that in your perspective?
Well, again, I think it goes back to just stepping back and looking at the whole entire picture. Yeah, you know, I lost my job, but at the same time, there's more jobs out there. And maybe there's a reason why this job wasn't working out for me. So how am I going to get that next job? Instead of sitting there thinking about the fact that my boss just fired me and how dare that jerk fire me? And, you know, you can sit there and go along those negative thought patterns, or you can acknowledge the fact that it is what it is. And you got to pick up and dust off and move on. And it's not to say that you can't mourn a situation. I mean, I think everybody has a mourning or a grieving period, and I think that's totally acceptable. But I think it's when you get so cycled and stuck and spin on that mourning process that you forget that you got to spin out of it and figure out a goal or a path to get you to where you want to be. And, you know, the reality of it is if you lose your job, you know, you're not going to want to sit at home and not do something. You're going to want to get a new job. So now the focus needs to shift on how am I going to get that new job? Because it really doesn't matter how you lost it or why you ended up where you are. You're there. So now it's a matter of how am I going to get a new job? Excuse me. What kind of job do I want? What are my goals? to get to that next spot. And then focusing on the goals of where you want to end up instead of how you got where you are.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I know it's not easy, and I think at the end of the day, because we can get so lost on just the negativity or the thoughts, and you gotta just do as much as you can to change that frame or change that focus, and really focus on the positivity. I think one of the things that I came to realize, even in our toughest moments, is just being grateful, like that, having that gratitude, right? And sometimes, you can just write down for 5 minutes, start thinking about what are you grateful for, and sometimes could be the simple fact that you woke up today, right? I always say, if you're watching this, you're listening to us, that means that your purpose is not over yet, and the universe, God, whoever you believe in, has a lot more for you to do. And so being grateful for that, or being grateful to see my hands, or to read or write, whatever. And so sometimes that can help you to start being grateful for the little things that you have, and not focus too much on the negative things that you lost or wish you could have, right?
Absolutely. There was a time, I remember, I think it was after my divorce, I was really struggling, and I had a friend who, we were visiting, and I was just so down on the situation and how I didn't get to see my children, and I didn't, I think it was the holidays or something, which is tough in general. But I remember I sat down and I made a list of all the things that I was grateful for. Like, I have a beautiful home. I have a career. I have 3 healthy children. And yeah, I don't get them on Christmas Day, but really Christmas Day can be whatever day I want it to be. We can celebrate Christmas on the 23rd. We can celebrate it on the 26th. Why am I crying over a 25th, not having my kid on 25th, when really Christmas is whatever we make it? And I mean, there's other people in the profession, doctors and, police, fire, that they don't get that luxury of having Christmas morning or Christmas afternoon or whatever it may be. And they have to designate Christmas a different time. So this is just that. And so I think, it's just a matter of redirecting that a little bit, and not getting so consumed by what the formality of it is, but what it is for you, and what works best for your family.
Yeah, definitely. Now, getting back to your kids and going through what you went through and your experience, what have been some of the fundamental changes or things that you said, no way, Jose, I'm not going to do these things. I'm going to do it this way because I want my kids to have X, Y, and Z type of life? Like, what have been some of those changes or things that you said to yourself, like, this is the path I want to take with my kids?
It's so easy for me because growing up with very little, and even when I got adopted, I was still adopted by a family that didn't have a whole lot. And so now that I've worked really hard and I feel like I'm at a state financially where, you just want to give your kids everything you didn't have, but at the same time, you want to set them up for success too. And so for me, like, I don't want to just give my kids everything they could possibly want, because then they'll never have a reason to work for it themselves. And that's probably one of the things that I've had to step back a little bit and recognize, like, yeah, my kid needs a car, or yeah, they have college to pay for, but guess what? I figured out a way to pay for all my stuff up to this. And I appreciate the value of it so much more. Of course, I want to give it to them and make them happy, but at the same time, they also need to understand the fruition that goes into a hard dollar earned. And if I just give it to them, they're never going to feel that impact or understand what the value of that dollar is. And so that's probably one of the things I think I've carried with me as a mother, with how I'm as a parent, is that I try to teach them those life lessons of making sure that they understand that everything's earned and not given. And my children, my oldest 2, I've got a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, and one of the first things I did with them when they started getting in the workforce, which, by the way, I was like, hey, you're 15, 16, guess what? You're old enough to go work. And it's not that I needed them to work, or they needed to go buy their own clothes or whatever, which is all the things I had to do. But it's really more about that principle of understanding that there's a purpose in life. And guess what? You're old enough that you're getting to that point where you need to understand that it's not just chores at home anymore, but it's also about getting yourself built ready for success in your adult life too. And so the first thing I've done with both of my oldest 2, now that they're working, is I make them set up checking and savings accounts, and we work on budgets. And so even though, at 16, whatever years old they are, mom's still going to help take care of them financially. They still need to understand how they can spend their own money that they've earned. And I make them put 80% of their payroll into their savings account, and they put 20% in their checking. And we'll start their checking account off with $500. And hey, guess what? You got $700 in your account right now. And you have up until 500, but when you get to that 500 point, guess what? You're cut off because that's your buffer. And so you've got $200 that you can figure out whatever you want to do with over the next couple of weeks until you get paid again, but that's all you got. So make it work, you know. Just those life learned skills that I wish I would have known more about as a younger version of me, but I want to make sure they understand how it all works to set them up for success.
No, I definitely love that. That's actually a good way to teach them finances, responsibility, discipline, which is pretty good. Now, what about the aspect of, so you have obviously the tangible or the materialistic aspects that you can give your kids, and I want to have everything. What about more on the side of the emotional side of it, right? Obviously, with you going through foster from pastor, there was the lacking of emotional attention. What about that for you and your kids?
You know, it's funny. My oldest teases me that I'm not a coddling mother. And, you know, I kind of disagree. I do have a coddling sense of me. I do have emotions. Like I'm more of a, okay, I'll cry with you. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but okay, let's move on. And sometimes I forget that they don't move on as fast as I do. And I have to slow down and let them grieve whatever they're grieving at their pace. But then there's a point where, okay, we've got to cycle this out and figure out our plan going forward, to how we're going to fix it. And sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for me coming from my past because I'm always in fix it next mode, you know, that I have to slow down sometimes and at their pace and recognize that they're not me.
yeah, definitely. I love what you the advice that you gave your kids, and this could really be applicable to anyone that's listening to us. You said, I tell my kids often that we all have our tough days, but to remember on those days that we should take the time to reflect on all of our fortunes: house, cars, jobs, good health, and faith. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah. You know, an example of this, you know, my oldest, she's 19 now, so I'm a college mom. And she just had gotten a new job where she got offered health insurance. And so I have been paying her health insurance, and I said I would take care of it, you know, as long as she's in school, to help her out, as long as she's living with me. And she came to me and she said, Mom, I can get health insurance through my employer. Should I take it? And I'm like, yeah, let's look into it, see what the cost savings are. And then she's like, well, if I save the money, then can you just give me that money instead of paying for it? I'm like, how's that really saving me money, you know?
Yeah, right.
And she was kind of upset with me that I wasn't going to give her the difference. And I had to tell her, I'm like, you know, listen, here's the thing. Like, you're focused on what you're not getting, but you're forgetting what you've been given. And so stop this focusing on how you think I need to, the money that you're saving me needs to be something that benefits you, because how's that benefit me, the person who's been taking care of you? And, you know, I will pay for the new insurance rate, as I said I would, because you are saving me money. But I don't think that it's fair for you to assume that I'm going to pay the difference and you're going to start pocketing, you know, saving money off mama over here. So I think sometimes that's an example of that I kind of use with, you know, making sure that you're focusing on what you are getting instead of what you haven't received.
Yeah. No, I love that. So besides your book, what is it that you're doing now?
I have used, I've kind of worked with Halo Foundation. They're a nationwide organization that helps homeless children. And so I'm donating proceeds from my book sales to their organization. We have a local foster care community that I've also kind of worked alongside of. One of the founders reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and mentioned that they were low on clothing and their personal community. And so we've organized a fundraiser through my business to help acquire clothing, and maybe it's getting close to Christmas time too, some gift cards and stuff to help pay for Christmas needs. But that's kind of what I'm doing to help give back. Also, you know, just bringing awareness to the foster care organization in general. Like there's kids out there that don't get a whole lot. You know, I know there was a couple of holiday seasons where I think my Christmas was socks and underwear and clothes, which, I mean, I don't know if you have kids, but if I give my kids clothes at Christmas, it gets tossed to the side, which is kind of sad.
Yes.
But it's true.
Yeah.
And so just maybe, you know, taking a few minutes to put together a gift card or grab a gift card next time you're out purchasing, you know, Target, Walmart, wherever it may be, and just donating it to your local foster care organization to help out some of these kids that could use something outside of just the necessities that we take for granted.
No, that's awesome. How can people connect with you?
I have a website, angiehundley.com. And on my website, I have clicks or links to my social media platforms.
Okay.
And there's a way you can message me through there. I try to get through them as much as I can. As you can imagine, with a new book launch, I've been a little bit inundated. So
Yeah.
but my goal is to try to touch base with everybody. I've already received a lot of wonderful comments about people that have read my memoir that have reached out to share their thoughts and thank me for giving them so much insight on my perspective of what I've been through, and as well as helping inspire. And so, I love getting those comments. It makes my heart swell, honestly, to know that I've fulfilled a purpose. And so, yeah, so you can reach out to me on any of those platforms, and I'll do my best to get back.
And then they can find information on your book there too, or they can go to Amazon.
Yeah, there's a link on my website that you can buy the book, and the book's on Amazon. So you can search, recipe for bad lemons, and it'll pop up. And it's a fairly short read. I tried to make it short and simple because I know for me, when I would go to bookstores, if it was too big, I'd put it back on the shelf because I just look at the timeline on it. I'm like, I don't have time to read that. So I've been told it's about a 2 to 4 hour read roughly. But it's short, straight to the point, and I think it will be enough to help inspire whoever needs it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know as a fellow author, people ask me if I do autograph copies. So do you do autograph copies, or they get them directly from Amazon?
I can do autograph copies until I get overwhelmed with it.
Yeah.
I always say that because I feel like I'm at the post office every day.
Yeah.
So trying to coordinate, that's not the easiest way to do that. Generally when I've done it so far, it's been for like larger corporations that have asked me to maybe bulk sign. I'll have some signing events too. And of course, if anyone that's listening, wants a signing event, wants to be here all through this COVID timeline, then I'll be traveling around to do that. And there's a request on my website. If folks are wanting to have that done, then I'll be filtering through those as well.
Okay. Awesome. And what are some of the things that you do now to kind of keep you in, definitely you're positive, definitely you've overcome a lot of things in your life. So are there any habits, rituals you do on a day-to-day basis to put you in the state of mind?
Well, I do exercise. I got 3 to 4 days a week. I do CrossFit. Okay. And so I try to, keep my body healthy, which is important to me. But I mean, I'll be honest, I have my moments where I'm down or something will affect me a little bit. And I may not recognize it right away that I'm, I call it my funk. I may not recognize it, but once I do recognize it, a lot of times it's just, I realize I have to slow down my pace because I'm a very fast-paced person. And I'm just go. And then it'll hit me like, okay, I'm off tilt. What do I need to do to fix this? And I'll just sit sometimes and just think, okay, what is bugging me? What's got my mind off? Like, okay, I'm tired. I haven't slept very well. I need to sleep. Maybe I need to do some more exercising. Maybe I'm not drinking enough water. My head, I'm getting headaches, or sometimes it's just a matter of taking the time out and bringing yourself in tune with your own body and what's going on, and bringing it back to health of where it needs to be. And a lot of times for me, it's just because I overload myself and I recognize that I need to slow down and just rest, like no friends, nothing, just veg on the couch and actually watch TV or read a book or whatever it may be. But it's just, I think, a matter of just slowing down and listening to your body and what works for you and what's got you off, just really like deep thinking. And then it's a plan of attack at that point.
Yeah. And talking about that, and getting out of that funk or that, negative state of mind, or even just being down. I've been asked that a lot of times. And I want to know if there's anything else that you can add to that, or based on what you just mentioned right now, is, how do you get out of that? I'm going through this, it could have been a breakup. It could have been whatever. And I'm just going through this very down moment that all of a sudden, my demeanor became much smaller. And so I've often been asked, well, how did I come out of that state of mind to start changing the dynamics instantly? And obviously you talked about slowing down, kind of looking at it from that perspective. If there's anything else that you can think of that we can leave the listeners with?
I think that it's always good if you have a few minutes to maybe take a note card or a piece of paper and just make a list of all the things that you're grateful for. And then keep that in your nightstand or keep it somewhere near you to when you have those moments where you're just kind of questioning your purpose or feeling off, that you can pull that thing out and you can be like, you know what? I've got 4 beautiful children that are all healthy. I have a job. I have a career that keeps me moving. I've got beautiful friendships. And sometimes maybe grab a friend, and just a friend that you feel comfortable unloading on, which I'm not good at that because I don't ever want to ask anybody for anything. But sometimes recognizing you just got to get it out, grab a notebook and start journaling, like write down what's in my head, what's, just getting it all out, because sometimes I think that just getting it out of your mind will help, cycle it out. But really just trying to focus on all of the wonderful things in life that get you up in the morning and get you moving instead of what's got you down.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Angie, I want to say thank you for taking the time and being an open book with us and sharing your story. Anything else you want to say before I let you go?
No, I appreciate you having me on your podcast, and I appreciate anybody who wants to support my memoir. And I'm just grateful that you asked me to come on.
Yeah, definitely. Really appreciate you. So thank you so much. For the rest of you guys, please make sure you check out Angie, go to her page, go to Amazon, get her book, and stay tuned for the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this podcast. I'll see you guys. Bye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.